Welcome to the Mentor Studio, where today's thought leaders and leading entrepreneurs inspire and bring real-world ideas that help you take your career to levels you've only dreamed of. Now buckle in. Here's your host, Michael Silvers.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to welcome you to the Mentor Studio again. You know, it's great to have you on the broadcast. And that last show was really interesting because Michael Hutchinson, as you all heard, has moved from being vice president for Tony Robbins in the beginning, in the starting days, to this travel business. So you never know where business is going to take you and the skills that he developed that brought you forward. And I think it's great that everything that we're learning is it's who's the mentor in our lives that get us to where we're at. And some people are the mentor you don't expect. Sometimes it's a mentor that you realize sometime in your life that just took you from where you were to where you're going. And we're still learning every day. We never stop learning and it never stops going. And we thank everybody for the Mentor Studio. My guest today is somebody that I know really well, and he's been in my visual for many years because of being on broadcast TV for over 3 decades. But his experience and what brought him to where he's at is why I wanted him on the show today, because I think he's got a tremendous foundation, mentoring, and will bring just tremendous value to as an audience. Now, all of you know I usually make everybody earn their own right, but I'm going to read his bio because it's powerful. So this is going to take about 2.5 minutes. Everybody sit back, relax, enjoy, as we say. And yeah, there we go. Yeah, Jeff, you are too. This is awesome. Okay. And I won't read the whole thing, but I'm going to read most of it. The eruption of the volcano of Mount St. Helens was the biggest natural disaster in the history of the Pacific Northwest. It reshaped the physical landscape and emotional landscape of everyone who lived through it. Few people were as immersed in that experience as Jeff Renner, who entered that experience as a science journalist and broadcaster. He left with the tough lessons born of near-death encounters and loss of colleagues. Short-term and long-term stressors, the sense of burnout inherent and emergent in such natural disasters. He also learned how such life-altering challenges can lead to personal transformation. These experiences, those lessons, and by the way this is written, everybody, take a listen when you write your own bios, depending on how you're using it, because this is very well done. Led to a storied career as a journalist, broadcaster, explorer, scientist, and author. Over rock and glaciers into the birthing room of an active volcano, craters underwater to interact with some of the ocean's largest and most powerful predators, into the air commanding aircraft and teaching others to do the same and better learn to command themselves. It would lead to a presidential interview in the White House Rose Garden, overseas assignments in the Vatican, and research stations in the Swiss Alps. He was a candidate for a NASA journalist in space program. These accomplishments were recognized by his peers with 9 Emmys, and by those who served with what Jeff considered his biggest honor, a nightly invitation into their homes. Mine was one of them. The trust of those viewers and their families. The television news anchor team on which he served for more than 3 decades earned him some of the highest ratings in television news, not only in Seattle, but nationwide. Jeff has done a lot more, but without any further ado, let's give it up for Mr. Jeff Renner. Thank you, Jeff, for being on.
Oh, thanks, Michael. I guess I better sit up now. You invited us to sort of lean back, so now I'll sit up and we'll get down to business.
That's it. It is great. And you've done so much. And then, the next piece really goes into your philanthropic and what you do for the community. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about that a little bit for a second, because the 2 things we talk about on the show is sometimes we go into the mentoring, but we also go into how we've been of service, and how that piece of being a service makes such a difference, because you didn't need to. That was a choice that you made. So can you talk a little bit about that of service piece in your life and some of the things that you have done and the people around you that have gained mentoring from that?
Well, I think number one, for me, that was fundamental, even in my family. I think no matter how we look at the challenges, the disappointments, the suffering, the sorrow that we've had in our lives, we're all blessed in so many different ways. And I always felt it was important to give thanks to that. And that really goes to my first mentor, which is one of the topics of that. As I started out in broadcast journalism, I was assigned to follow a wonderful reporter by the name of Jim Cummins, ended up being an NBC correspondent. And at the end of that mentorship, when I would follow him around and he'd guide me through the elements of the craft, the profession, I said to him, Jim, you have done so much for me, not only Jim, but his wife, Connie, who would invite me into their home and treated me as an extra son, though there wasn't a great age difference there. And I said, Jim, what can I do to ever say thank you to you, to ever show my appreciation? He said, what you can do best is to do for others what I did for you, to pay it forward. And I've taken that very seriously, Michael. And that's been sort of a theme, I hope, of my life. And as I've mentored others through internships, et cetera, that's really one of the things I've emphasized to them. Don't worry about saying thanks to me. My biggest thanks is seeing you spread your wings and do well in your professional career and in your personal life as well, but in helping others as you meet them along the way.
Yeah, and I think it is so true, because what I think part of what you've done in it being a mentor is really finding where they're at, right? Not making it about us,
Right.
not making it about there's that tendency of, well, I'm a big mentor because I've done such and such.
Yeah.
And then that's the ego. That's just that, and that doesn't help.
No, not at all. You stop to think about it. Somebody that is going to mentor with you, that is, I'm not sure if this is actually even grammatic, but the mentee as opposed to the mentor is probably a little bit uncomfortable, maybe a little bit self-conscious and lacking in self-confidence. Build them up. At this point, if somebody is looking to learn from you, you shouldn't need to build yourself up. Build them up and give them confidence and a foundation for success.
Right. And, I always go back to, because a lot of the in my previous life, as I say, my wife and I were nurses, and in nursing in the medical field, our physicians went through this all the time. It was see one, do one. We sort of ate our young along the way. And that nervousness in that situation, it's just the way it was. But I'm like, is this truly what teaching and mentoring is about? Throw us into the fray when we have people's lives at stake. There was always something there that we always went, it cannot be this way everywhere.
Right.
And part of that as we move forward is, how do we make a difference in the world? So you've had an amazing background and you've done a lot in your life, but is there one thing that you've done that you remember today, realizing how many people's lives you did change, and that changed your own?
I would say there are a couple of things there, Michael. I mean, there was the work as a meteorologist on television in some very nasty weather storms that occasionally took lives or severely damaged, if not destroyed, property. And that ability to essentially be a reference point, a point of confidence for them, that we may not get every detail, but they knew that at least we were doing our best to give them the best possible forecast and to update it. I think that really sticks out, and it really means a lot to me. I just received a letter, and I've been retired now from television journalism and meteorology for about 5 years, that just was basically saying thanks. And it was from another person that was a scientist that I also worked with, and that meant a lot. But I think the other two things that really stick in my mind and that I keep going back to, I think they're mentors that are intentional, that we seek out, or they, through generosity or assignment, seek us out. But there are those accidental mentorships, and those are what I really come down to. I was assigned shortly after I came to the Seattle area. For anybody that's from the Great Lakes region, that's where I hail from originally, but I've lived out here for more than 40 years. I was assigned to learn how to climb mountains because they thought Mount Baker, the northernmost volcano in the Cascade chain of Washington, was getting ready to erupt. And so I went to climbing school with a photographer who was from Arizona and also had not done any glacier work. We learned how to climb. We ended up going up and down into the crater with a team of scientists. And one of the scientists I met was a young USGS scientist named David Johnston. And he was just so enthusiastic. I mean, there's steam vents, just roaring around you like jet engines. There's this nasty smell of sulfur. And every so often you sort of get the sense that the ground might be shaking, which it wasn't, but that was just your nerves. He was so at home there, he may as well have been fixing pancakes in his kitchen. And his enthusiasm was so strong. Well, I really enjoyed working with David. And about 2 years later, Mount St. Helens rumbled to life. And it so happens that when we went back down there, we went down there for the first earthquakes, came back, went back down. We ended up going down in a helicopter on that particular trip and called up a fellow that I knew at the University of Washington seismology lab. And he said, I'm a seismologist. Why don't you go with a real geologist? And so it so happened that David Johnston was the guy I went with. And it struck me, Michael, that when we were down there, we were standing on a mountain ridge, and he said, we essentially are standing next to a keg of dynamite. He said, the fuse is lit. The only thing we don't know is how big the explosion is going to be and how long that fuse is. And David was a top-notch scientist. I mean, he specialized in geochemistry, deciphering the changes in a volcano by chemical signatures in the steam and the various gases that are emitted. And we saw each other frequently over that time. And he loved deciphering and advancing the science, but he also believed it was important to bring the public along, to let them in on the excitement the scientists felt, but also let them understand the mystery and the risks that were involved. And it strikes me that my experience and David's experience back then really speak to what we're experiencing right now. And in this way, they discern the dangers. They recognize the need to close off some areas. People were very much against that among some groups, because they said, we're going to lose our tourism business. It's going to affect our ability to move freely or do what we want. And he faced a lot of flack. The U.S. Geological Survey faced a lot of flack. The state of Washington faced a lot of flack. And as it so happened, there was a Saturday morning that they had put enough pressure on. The governor allowed them to go in as in a caravan led by the state patrol and county sheriffs to check that their property was okay. And I was sent back down to go in with them. And I remember looking at our campsite, which was within what was called the red zone, that would eventually, within a matter of hours, be decimated, and thinking, gee, it's such a beautiful weekend. I'd like to go up there. Well, what I didn't know is Dave had accepted an invitation or a request to fill in for somebody else, and he was on a campsite overlooking the volcano. And if I knew Dave was there, I would have gone up to visit him. Well, everybody went back out. The next morning at 8:32, there was an identical caravan scheduled to go back in. I think it was at 11 o'clock in the morning. At 8:32, the volcano went off. If they had not shut that off, you would have had, instead of a death toll in terms of, I think it was 57, you would have probably had 4 to 6 to 7 times that many fatalities. And it was very sad that one of the fatalities was David. And it was just an accident of timing that at that time, it looked unlikely that it was going to erupt that weekend that I'm here even talking with you today. And we had other close calls after that. But that was, when you talk about things that stick in your mind, if you look on my desk behind me, that's a piece of pumice that I gathered out of the crater of Mount St. Helens some weeks after.
Wow. That, that's that kind of, and so with that moment in your life, that's something for everybody to, that's an important piece with the moment that you had in your life. And, sorry, of course, the loss of a friend, somebody you knew. How did that you could see change your mission, and even currently what you're working on today?
I think the fascination of Dave with science, helping to better understand, because I had not gone back to school yet to earn a degree, this time in atmospheric science. My first one was from science, was in science journalism. But that fascination really developed the understanding of how to communicate what's going on in science, how it impacts your life. But really the key element, Michael, was after David had died. I was 26 years old. That was in 1980. So anybody, don't bother doing the math. I'm 67 going on 68, depending on when you hear this. But the loss of a colleague like that, and realizing how close you came, and the, what shall I say, the mental and emotional difficulty of working your way through why them and not me, was really a challenge. But I had some videotaped interviews of David, and I thought, I knew his family was back in the Chicago area. My family at the time was living in southeast Wisconsin. And so I wrote his dad a letter. That's back before we had email. And I said, Mr. Johnson, I have some videotape programs that we did with your son. The time might not be right, but would you like me to send those to you? And he wrote back almost immediately and said, Jeff, he said, I'd really appreciate those. And he said, David had said you were from this area. Are you going to be back here anytime? As a matter of fact, I was going to be back in 2 weeks. And so I walked into the small suburban Chicago coffee shop, not knowing, what do you say to somebody who's lost their son and has to look at you and wonder, why my son and not this person? And he was very welcoming. And I'd say for anybody that ever finds themselves in that opportunity, you were in medicine. I'm sure you found that many, many times in a slightly different setting. They want most of all, I think, to be listened to and to help you fill in the gaps. And I remember we were getting up, ready to go. And he said to me, Jeff, he said, part of me wishes I'd never encouraged Dave's interest in geology. And here's another lesson. David was not a very good student in mathematics. And he had to talk to his dad. And he said, I don't know if I can do this. And his dad said, the professors will help you. If you love the basic topic, you'll make it through. Well, he got a PhD in, as I said, geochemistry. But his dad said to me, he said, I couldn't have done that because David used to say to me, Dad, each day for me is a new adventure. It's an opportunity to learn something new. And it's an opportunity to use that knowledge and that skill to help other people. And that still sends a bit of a chill up my spine. And it's something I've said in many of the talks that I give. And it's something that I've tried to live by at this time. Now, again, many people are going to be listening instead of watching this. But on my desk, I've got this little vial of ash, and I gathered that out of Mount St. Helens. And just sort of keep it as a reminder of Dave and of that mission that he sort of set for himself and for others, and I've taken for myself.
Yeah, and I love too that you also said about they just want to be listened to.
Yeah.
Right. Because how many people, especially people either starting in business, entrepreneurs, whatever field you're in, just to have that moment that somebody actually listens to me, and that I matter at the moment. That's a huge piece. And that's what you allowed his dad, his parents to just be there for the moment.
Yeah.
And you were just there for them. And that's a great point. So what are you currently working on? What just floats your boat? What's the excitement in your life nowadays?
Well, right now I'm doing, and this is totally on a volunteer basis, a little TV program, basically looking at issues of current concern through the lens not only of faith, and that's a part of it, but also through ethics. And we've covered many, many different topics. As you know all too well, and anybody living in the Pacific Northwest, we had an extremely hot summer. We set all sorts of records. It's been referred to as mega heat. And we've got a program coming up in terms of the impact of heat on people who work outside. Medically, we've got a climate scientist we're going to talk about on how those exposures are going to be increasing and why it's not just a health problem, although that's big enough, why it's not just a personal problem, but it's also an economic problem too. If people can't work, if they get sick, there are medical costs to be covered. There's a loss to their communities if they're spending their income, et cetera. And certainly to anybody employing them too, if they look at the longer picture. So I love doing that program, and I'm doing a lot of talking on, in fact, I think I've got about 4 talks over the next month on climate change and climate anxiety, basically trying to use, my background and skills as a meteorologist, as a weather scientist, if you will, and who can read the research and is familiar with the field to try to bring them up to date on where we're at, what we're looking at.
Wow. And my team will put in the show notes. But what's the name of your show?
Oh, it's called Challenge 2.0. If you go, it's both broadcast locally, but it's also on if you go to YouTube, it's on Paths to Understanding. And you can go to, they have different things, and they have playlists and videos, and just look for the one that talks about Challenge 2.0, because we've done a lot of fascinating programs on current topics. And I think of one that we did with parents of children that had died from suicide. And, it's very tough when you do those programs because we are, and I can speak to this in news, we are professionals, but we're also human beings. And sometimes those stories are very hard to listen to and hard to continue a line of narrative and or questions. But I feel good about what we're doing. We're now entering our 4th season with that.
That's fantastic. That's great. One last question. This has been great because, also people like to hear the stories, and even though part of your story was a loss, it was the learning from the loss, right? And the person that you still remember, and you continue forward every day. And this audience knows I never hide. I go to mass I go to mass. I pray every day. It's a big part of who I am, and with my wife, of course. And it's what do we learn from every day when we do something for somebody else? What do we learn? What is that learning? How do we bring it forward? And I think it's great because you do talk in stories. It's great with the experience you've had because that's how people learn. They learn from the metaphor and the story, and that they can, oh, I have that. Oh, and I think it's okay sometimes in those moments. If there's a tear, it's okay. There's been this very stoic, I'm going to report it, and I think those days are over, but we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. But for somebody, this is always the thing that comes up also. So here I am. I might be going into journalism. I might be going into entertainment because we have people across the spectrum who listen to this show.
Right.
We've had people in entertainment on the show. Just if they were starting out in business, it's all relationships. But when you're first starting out, is there just a piece of advice you would give anybody who wanted to get into this medium or journalism or broadcast or except for, don't do it. But no, I'm kidding. Right.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think there are still opportunities. I think it's a much more challenging environment for people that are going into that right now than it was for me. But I would say two things, really, Michael. And one was my wife and I were just attending a concert by John Legend down in Bend, Oregon with some friends. And he is a fabulous performer and a wonderful human being, too. That just comes across. But he had a quote that I really loved. And he said, luck is when opportunity and preparation collide. And he may have or coincide. It may have been a little bit different, but that's how I remember it. I think that's very true. And I was a flight instructor for a while, and I used to, drive it into my students, practice. And you get that muscle memory in your brain as well as in your physical tactile muscles, that success becomes much more easily achieved. And you're ready when those opportunities arrive. And I think the other thing is just believe in your dreams, persist with those, and even through bad experiences, and negative feedback and that sort of thing. John mentioned how many times he was turned down. And I can think of how many times, I was told that even when I went back to school for a meteorology degree, it was unusual for somebody that had a liberal arts background to be able to make it through the physical sciences, which was heavy in math and physics. And the chair of the department basically tried to discourage me. Well, I was stubborn. And made it through, with some blood, sweat, and toil. But I think just believe in your dreams and then seek out those people, not necessarily who are the absolute best in your field, though, give that a try, but those who you feel a little bit of chemistry with, because they're more likely to connect and be able to help you, and you're going to better connect with them.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being on today. This is great. This has been, and everybody knows in the Mentor Studio, it's free flow. We don't really prep the questions. We have some of the same. We go where we go. That's the way a conversation should be. And it is just about having a conversation. And I think that brings the best out in people. And sometimes you don't know where we're going to end up. And this has been amazing, though, because you really set forward I think the importance of mentoring and just moving forward and doing it day by day. And things will happen. Tragedies happen. Great things happen. And you take it for the moment, you take the learning, and you continue moving forward. And I think that's a big piece. So, for myself in the Mentor Studio and one of my business partners, Mary Glorfield, we want to thank you so much for being on today. And also upcoming shows, we've got a very famous rock and roll star who will be on. You'll be hearing, yes, even though I'm a big Seahawks fan, I've got a Steeler who was in that game coming on the show. So, we bring everybody in. We don't have any holdbacks. So for myself at the Mentor Studio, Jeff Renner, thank you so much for being on today.
My pleasure, Michael.
Wonderful. And thank you all, everybody out there, whether it's your morning, afternoon, or evening, make it a great day. Find a mentor, do something different, and be of service to one person today. I want to thank you all so much. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
We're honored that you invested time with us today at the Mentor Studio. Now, don't be greedy. Share this knowledge bomb with all your dope peeps on Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. Actually, we'll even pay you to do it. To get the deets, please check out thementorsstudio.com.